The Siege of Eger stands as one of the most remarkable defensive victories in Europe's struggle against the Ottoman Empire in the 16th century. In 1552, the Ottomans advanced with nearly 40,000 elite soldiers, armed with modern weapons and heavy cannons capable of reducing stone walls to dust. Eger had only a few thousand defenders. By every calculation, the fortress should have fallen quickly. There was no clear path to survival, and yet that collapse never came. Behind those walls stood people who refused to accept the odds. Soldiers fought beyond exhaustion. Civilians rebuilt shattered defenses as fast as they were destroyed. A young inventor, armed with strange and improvised weapons, turned what should have been an unstoppable advance into confusion and chaos. A united effort, driven by sheer will, transformed the siege into legend. To understand how the Siege of Eger became one of the most unlikely stands in European history, it is necessary to picture the world just before it unfolded, a world stretched thin, weary, and waiting for something terrible to arrive. For decades, Hungary had lived under a shadow. A generation earlier, at Mohács, its army had been shattered so completely that the kingdom never truly recovered. The king was dead, the nobles scattered, and the land itself torn apart. One region fell under Ottoman rule, another looked desperately to the Habsburgs, and everything in between became a fragile patchwork of villages struggling simply to survive. As the years passed, the shadow grew longer. Fortress after fortress collapsed. Buda, once the proud capital, was already lost. Szolnok, Veszprém. Names that had once meant safety now marked the slow retreat of a nation. Each year, the frontier shrank, and each year, the crescent banners climbed farther north. By the early autumn of 1552, the Ottoman Empire saw an opportunity too valuable to ignore. North of the broken frontier lay Hungary's precious mining towns, rich with silver and wealthy enough to fund armies and sustain kingdoms. If these towns fell, the Habsburgs would bleed coin, soldiers, and influence. Standing just before those mines was a single hilltop fortress, guarding the roads like a lonely gatekeeper. Eger was so small that many foreign generals barely bothered to pronounce its name. It was not a great city or a grand strategic capital. It was a quiet stronghold, surrounded by fields, vineyards, and narrow streets where farmers, soldiers, priests, and craftsmen lived shoulder to shoulder. The people of Eger understood how fragile their world had become. They had seen refugees dragging carts along the roads. They had heard whispers of burning towns. They had watched distant smoke rise from fortresses that once seemed untouchable. No one in Eger believed they were the center of anything, but they understood one truth. If their walls ever gave way, everything behind them, the mines, the countryside, and the northern approaches, Europe, would lie open and exposed. Far to the south, in the warmer plains closer to the heart of the empire, Ottoman commanders were already setting plans into motion. The empire had tasted victory across 3 continents. Its armies were seasoned, confident, and supported by a war machine more organized than anything Hungary could field. 2 commanders, Ahmed Pasha and Ali Pasha, prepared to lead a combined force northward. They studied maps, calculated distances, and sent messages to Constantinople, confirming what everyone in the imperial court already believed. Eger would fall quickly. Eger should fall quickly. Eger was simply too small to stand in the way of an empire. And so the preparations began. The Ottoman army did not move like an ordinary force. It moved like a traveling world. Tens of thousands of infantry and cavalry gathered on the plains. Engineers assembled crates of tools, beams, and iron spikes for siege works. Siege masters inspected powder, fuses, and the long wooden bit. Supports needed to build assault ramps and mining tunnels. Long lines of camels and oxen strained beneath the weight of bronze cannons. Some of the cannons were small enough for rapid fire. Others were so massive they required entire teams just to move. These guns were the pride of the empire. Weapons designed to turn stone into dust and fear into surrender. Wagons loaded with food, water, tents, timber, and medical supplies stretched beyond the horizon. Blacksmiths hammered repairs late into the night. Drums rolled as units formed into marching columns. The entire host moved with an effortless confidence born from years of victory. They had crushed strongholds far larger than Eger. They had broken armies far greater than anything Hungary could now assemble. When the signal finally came on a warm morning at the edge of autumn, the ground itself seemed to tremble beneath the first heavy steps. Under thousands of snapping crescent banners, the great Ottoman host began its march north. Its destination was Eger. Its commanders expected another easy conquest. But beyond the hills, inside that small, quiet fortress, waited a people who had already decided they would not run, no matter what was coming. As the Ottoman army moved north, its advance changed everything across the frontier. Villages emptied, roads fell silent. Inside Eger, the weight of what was coming settled over the fortress long before the enemy appeared. In the council chamber, the nobles understood the situation with unsettling clarity. Reinforcements were unlikely to arrive in time, and retreat would leave the entire region exposed. Eger needed someone who could manage a siege with discipline, strategy, and a steady hand. That decision led to István Dobó. His reputation was not built on dramatic victories, but on composure. He understood how fortresses survived, through organization, endurance, and the ability to keep people focused when fear threatened to unravel them. He was the only one who could take Eger's limited resources and turn them into something that might hold. When Dobó arrived, he went straight to work. He inspected the walls from corner to corner, studying angles of attack, weak points in the stone, blind spots, and the positions where enemy cannons could do the most damage. He examined the gates, the wells, the ammunition stores, the food supplies, and the narrow streets that could become choke points if the enemy broke through. He was not searching for strengths. He was counting vulnerabilities and matching each one with a plan. Once Dobó began, the fortress changed quickly. Masons reinforced the outer walls. Carpenters strengthened the gates and built wooden barriers for fallback positions. Blacksmiths repaired armor, sharpened blades, and produced arrowheads in large batches. Women cleaned and filled water barrels, organized food stores, and prepared simple medical stations. Young people carried stones and sandbags to the ramparts. Soldiers trained from sunrise to nightfall, drilling until their movements became instinctive. Courtyards turned into practice grounds, armories filled with freshly repaired weapons. Every storage room, every hallway, every tower became part of a larger defensive system. Eger was small, but now it was prepared. As the days passed, scouts reported movement to the south. Slow at first, then closer, then too close to ignore. The signs grew clearer: abandoned farms, distant smoke, and a haze along the horizon that thickened with each passing day. Late one afternoon, the shape of the approaching army finally revealed itself. A broad, shifting cloud rose from the southern plains, steady, wide, unmistakably the movement of a massive force. Everyone on the walls understood that the time for preparation was ending. The siege had not yet begun, but its arrival was no longer distant. It was approaching with the certainty of a tide. Eger, newly fortified and united under Dobó's command, stood ready for the first impact. By the time the Ottoman army reached the outskirts of Eger, the valley below the fortress had already begun to change. What had once been open fields and scattered farmhouses filled with movement, organized, disciplined, overwhelming. Members of infantry poured into position. Cavalry units rode in long arcs, and wagons rumbled into neat rows, as if an entire city had decided to settle beneath the walls. From the ramparts, the defenders watched the transformation unfold. It was not chaos. It was not noise for the sake of fear. It was precision. The kind of precision only an empire could achieve. Within hours, tents stretched across the valley in ordered clusters, each marked by banners fluttering in the steady wind. Smoke rose from cookfires as thousands of soldiers prepared for the days ahead. Then came the artillery. Teams of oxen dragged heavy bronze cannons into place along the slopes facing the southern walls. Engineers followed with wooden beams, ropes, and powder kegs. They worked with practiced efficiency, leveling the ground, fixing angles, and preparing firing positions that would soon hammer against Eger's defenses. Even at a distance, the defenders recognized the size of some of the cannons, weapons capable of breaking stone that had stood for generations. The sight left no room for doubt. The full force of the siege had arrived. Inside the fortress, the mood shifted once again. The weeks of preparation under Dobó had created order. Now, that order hardened into resolve. People moved with purpose, not panic. Soldiers checked their weapons, tightened leather straps on their armor, and took their positions along the battlements. Courtyards filled with stacks of stones, barrels of water, and spare shields. Eger had become a fortress in every sense of the word. It was during this final stage of preparation that another figure stepped forward, one whose contribution would soon shape the course of the siege. Gergely Bornemisa, a young man known for his cleverness, had been working quietly in the shadows of the inner courtyard. With Ottoman artillery now lining the hillsides, he presented his ideas to Dobó. Bornemisa was not a soldier in the traditional sense. He was an inventor, someone who looked at gunpowder and saw possibility rather than danger. He had spent days assembling mixtures, testing shapes, and preparing containers that could be thrown from the walls with devastating effect. Barrels packed with flammable materials, glass spheres filled with explosive powders, crude but deadly devices designed to burst into flame on impact. His work represented a different kind of defense, one built not on strength, but on ingenuity. And in a fortress where numbers were not on their side, ingenuity mattered. Throughout the afternoon, the defenders watched as the Ottoman camp continued to expand. Supply caravans arrived one after another. Siege engineers marked lines in the dirt, preparing trench work and forward batteries. Cavalry detachments patrolled the perimeter, ensuring no escape route remained open. By evening, the valley glowed with thousands of small fires. From the walls, Eger looked down on an ocean of tents and flickering embers, a reminder of the scale of the force they were about to face. Yet the fortress remained steady. The gates were barred, the torches were lit, final preparations continued with quiet determination. As darkness settled, the drums of the Ottoman army rolled across the valley. Slow, deep, deliberate. The sound climbed the walls and echoed through the stone courtyards, a signal that the siege was no longer approaching. It had arrived. Inside those walls, among soldiers, craftsmen, families, and the small team of inventors gathered around Bornemissa's creations, Eger prepared to endure the first assault of a force far larger than itself. At dawn, the siege revealed its true weight. The first Ottoman cannon fired across the valley, slamming into the southern wall with a force that shook dust from the rafters and sent fragments of stone skittering across the battlements. Moments later, more guns joined in. A steady, punishing rhythm hammered the same sections of wall again and again. The defenders responded as best they could. Smaller cannons fired downward at Ottoman gun crews, hoping to disrupt their work. Muskets cracked from the towers. Arrows arced into the valley. But the imbalance was unmistakable. The Ottoman guns had range, volume, and brute power. Eger had accuracy and elevation, but far fewer weapons. Inside the fortress, movement became tight and disciplined. Runners carried water to the ramparts. Engineers marked cracks before they spread. Workers shoveled debris away to keep firing lines clear. Everyone understood the same truth. The walls could not endure this punishment forever. By late morning, the bombardment intensified. Under its cover, Ottoman infantry began advancing across the field. Shields raised, engineers carrying tools and bundles of wood. Their movement was controlled and confident, the same advance that had overwhelmed countless fortresses across Europe. But halfway up the slope, discipline collided with something unexpected. Bornemissa's team stepped into position along the inner parapets. Their weapons looked small, barrels sealed with resin, clay spheres packed with explosive mixtures. But they carried a danger none of the attackers recognized. The first barrel rolled downhill, bouncing awkwardly. The front ranks ignored it, assuming it was debris from the bombardment. Then it detonated. Flame tore outward, lighting the slope in sudden fire. Shields dropped. Soldiers stumbled back. Others froze, unsure what had struck them. Before order could be restored, another barrel exploded, spreading burning oil across the ground. Formations broke. Men scattered sideways. Engineers abandoned their tools. Several soldiers slipped on the burning oil, crashing into one another in a chain of confusion. Then the clay spheres fell, small, fast, unpredictable. They shattered against shields and armor, erupting into sparks and sharp flashes of powder. Flames clung to wood and cloth. The explosions came irregularly, making it impossible to predict where to step or how to reform. The advance collapsed into a forced retreat down the slope. Not a rout, the Ottoman army was too seasoned for that, but a moment of shock, a rare hesitation from a force that believed victory was already assured. For the defenders, that moment was everything. Archers and musketeers poured fire into the disrupted ranks. Stones crashed down from the battlements. Even a few of Eger's smaller cannons found their mark among the scattered infantry, driving them farther back. Yet no one inside the fortress mistook this for victory. Cracks continued spreading across the walls. Exhaustion set in, and the enemy artillery never stopped firing. By evening, smoke clung to the southern face of the fortress. The air tasted of powder and grit. Soldiers leaned against the battlements, listening to the distant rumble of cannons being repositioned for the next day. Despite the strain, Eger had endured the first full assault. The walls still stood. The defenders still held their posts. And for the first time, the Ottoman army had been forced to step back. The day ended without collapse, and that alone was a victory. The days that followed became a grinding test of endurance. The Ottoman artillery did not ease. Every morning began with the same deep concussion of cannon fire striking the southern wall, each blast widening the damage left from the day before. Dust hung constantly in the air. Sections of the battlements had to be cleared again and again, just to allow defenders to move. Eger was no longer bracing for impact, it was absorbing it. As the walls weakened, the Ottomans shifted tactics. Trenches crept closer to the fortress, inch by inch, shielded by wooden screens and raised earth. By the third day, their forward positions were close enough to reach the slope before defenders could fire more than a handful of shots. That was when the first scaling attempts began. Tall ladders were carried forward under cover of shields. Iron hooks were thrown up against the parapets. The defenders met them head-on. Fighting on the walls was immediate and physical. Soldiers shoved ladders back with poles. Others used spears to push attackers off before they could reach the top. Arrows, boiling water, stones, anything that could break momentum was used. The noise never ceased. Wood cracked, armor scraped, boots clawed at stone. It did not take long for the strain to show. Eger did not have endless reserves of men. Every defender counted. Every injury mattered. Fatigue crept into arms and legs long before the cannons fell silent for the day. Many soldiers fought with bandaged hands or bruised ribs. Some did not leave the walls for hours at a time, rotating positions only when the next wave came into view. Inside the fortress, repairs never stopped. Workers filled cracks with mortar that barely had time to dry. Reinforcement beams were driven into weak sections. Buckets of stone were carried to the ramparts faster than they could be used. Through all of this, Bornemisa continued to work. His first weapons had slowed the Ottoman infantry, but now he needed something that could deal with ladders and attackers climbing under constant cover. He adapted quickly, creating smaller fire pots that could be dropped between the rungs, igniting ladders from within. He altered his mixtures to burn hotter and longer, hoping to force attackers back before they reached the top. In the evenings, his workspace became a center of controlled chaos. Assistants moved between tables, measuring powders, sealing clay, testing fuses. Soldiers passed through carrying broken weapons, asking for repairs or replacements. The sound of hammers and grinding stones continued long after the cannon fire stopped. By the end of the week, the southern wall was on the edge of collapse. A deep crack split through one section, wide enough for a man to place his arm inside. Each new cannon blast sent fragments falling inward. The defenders reinforced it with whatever they could find: timber, sandbags, earth. But the pressure grew heavier with every blow. Everyone sensed the same truth. If the wall broke, the next assault would pour directly into the breach. And the Ottomans knew it as well. They increased the bombardment, shifting their heaviest guns to focus on that single weakness. The impacts became slower but deeper, each shot driving the wall closer to giving way. The defenders stood ready behind it, waiting. As sunset fell on the 8th day, the damaged section trembled with every hit. Dust drifted down in steady sheets. The air tasted of stone, smoke, and exhaustion. Eger had endured longer than anyone expected, but the wall that protected it was reaching its limit. If the next day brought another concentrated assault, the fight would no longer be on the battlements. It would be inside the fortress. Eger had held through fire, ladders, trenches, and overwhelming artillery. But the moment of collapse was drawing closer with every heartbeat. On the morning of the 9th day, the Ottoman army shifted into a different rhythm. Cannon fire, once steady, now struck with heavier intent. Each blast hit the same weakened section of wall, shaking the entire fortress. Stones fell in clumps. Dust billowed through widening cracks. The defenders felt the vibration through their boots long before the breach appeared. Late in the morning, the wall finally gave way. A section collapsed inward, sending debris across the courtyard and opening a jagged gap wide enough for several men to enter at once. The sound rolled through the fortress like a warning, leaving no room for misunderstanding. The next assault would not climb ladders. It would come straight through the opening. The Ottomans moved quickly. Infantry surged toward the breach, supported by archers and artillery. Standards rose, drums pounded. Engineers cleared rubble to make space for the first wave. Their confidence was clear. They had broken stronger walls than this. Inside the fortress, defenders rushed to fill the line. Soldiers formed tight ranks behind the fallen stones. Civilians carried sandbags and beams, building makeshift barricades. Every movement carried urgency. No one waited for orders. Everyone understood what was at stake. The first wave struck fast. Ottoman infantry stormed the breach, climbing over broken stone and firing upward. Spears and muskets met them at close range. The space was tight, loud, and violent. The defenders had height, but the attackers had momentum, and each push drove them deeper into the rubble. Above the breach, Bornemisa prepared his final weapons. He had saved his most dangerous mixtures for this moment. Fire pots, designed to burst outward in compact charges, igniting on contact. He and his team worked without pause, lighting fuses and dropping the devices directly into the press of advancing men. The effect was immediate. Flashes erupted among the attackers. Fire spread through the rubble. The narrow space magnified the blasts, sending men stumbling backward and buying precious seconds for the defenders. Still, the Ottomans pushed again and again. Each wave pressed farther than the last. The noise rose into a constant roar. Steel on stone, boots scraping, shouted commands. The defenders fought until their arms went numb, retreating only when the pressure forced them back, one step at a time. For a moment, it seemed the line might finally break. Then, the wind shifted. Thick smoke from the Ottoman artillery was blown back toward their own lines. Visibility dropped. Confusion spread. Some units slowed, unsure where the breach stood. Others hesitated, waiting for orders that never reached them through the haze. It was not a storm. It was not a miracle. Just a brief turn of nature that arrived at the exact moment Eger needed it. The defenders seized the chance. They surged forward from inside the breach, driving pikes into disoriented attackers. Bornemisa's last firepots ignited along the slope, creating barriers of heat that split Ottoman formations. Arrows rained down from the towers onto soldiers struggling to regroup. Every defender, wounded or exhausted, joined the final push. The momentum shifted. Unable to recover cohesion, Ottoman infantry fell back down the slope to safer ground. Their commanders tried to rally them for another assault, but hesitation had taken hold. The breach was open, yet the fortress had not fallen. By the end of the day, it was clear the final blow had failed. That night, the Ottoman camp was quieter than usual. Messengers rode between tents. Engineers inspected cannons, but no new positions were prepared. Even the drums were silent. The next morning, the decision was unmistakable. The Ottoman army began to withdraw. Artillery was pulled away first. Then infantry columns marched south, leaving the valleys slowly and without ceremony. Inside Eger, there was no celebration. Most defenders were too exhausted to speak. Many simply sat along the walls, staring out at the emptying field, unsure how to respond to the simple fact of survival. The fortress had not won through strength. It had won by lasting longer than the enemy expected. When the final columns disappeared beyond the ridge, a heavy silence settled over Eger. The walls were cracked, homes were damaged, the people were exhausted. But the fortress still stood, and so did the will that had kept it standing. In the years that followed, the Siege of 1552 became more than a military event. It became a symbol, proof that a small garrison, outnumbered and outgunned, could hold when everything suggested it should fall. It showed that ingenuity mattered, that leadership mattered, and that the courage of ordinary people could shape history. Eger did not change the course of the empire, but it changed the course of those who lived behind its walls.